All right, folks, let's turn to Mark chapter 14. We're getting toward the end of Mark. And I need to start out making an apology, because last week my brain was running ahead of my tongue, and I said something that wasn't correct, and a lady came up to me afterward and said, "You were not correct there." And I said, "Okay." And she was right, and I was wrong, and I agreed, and I apologized. Here's what I said last week. I said in 1953 that I went to the IMA auditorium. Problem was, in 1953, I was 8 years old. I did not drive to the IMA auditorium when I was 8 years old. I drove to the IMA auditorium when I was 18 years old, which was 1963. I was off by 10 years. And the reason I mentioned that last week is because they had a religious meeting there with thousands of people there. And I heard that fella say that Christ was going to come back in 6 years, which meant 1963, he said the words, "We'll be back here by 1969. And thousands of people stood up and said, "Yay, rah," and all that kind of stuff, you know. So anyway, I apologize for missing by 10 years when I did something, you know, but it was a mistake. Okay. I have to write all this stuff down or I can't remember it. Okay, we're going to start with Mark chapter 14. And I would say we're going to get through the end of Mark 14, except Mark 14 has 72 verses. And so we're going to do the best we can. But we may not make it through all 72 verses. It's not the longest chapter in the Bible, but it's a pretty long chapter, okay? And 15 and 16 are quite short. So we get past 14, we're over the hump. Okay. Okay, we ready? Mark chapter 14, starting at verse 1. Read verses 1 and 2, and then we'll get going more. Oh, yeah, context. When is this happening? It's happening the last 7 days that Jesus, before he was crucified, okay? This is real close. The apostles and other people don't know that Jesus is going to die real quick, but Jesus knows it, and he talks about it, okay? So there's your background. Now the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread were only 2 days away, and the chief priests and teachers of the law were scheming to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him, but not during the festival, they said, or the people may riot. This is at least the fourth time in the book of Mark where it talks about these people planning to kill Jesus, actively planning. But now we're talking about soon they intend this to happen. And I can wander around here, but if you want to make comments, raise your hand or say something, you know. Otherwise, we'll keep moving on if you have any comments, okay? Verses 3 and, verse 3. While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table at the home of Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Now, you all know this story. It's a famous story. And in fact, later on, Jesus is going to say right here that everybody in the world is going to know about this woman because of what she did. But let's talk just a little bit about nard. How many of you have ever seen or smelled or know anything about nard? Well, that's not surprising, since I strongly suspect you can't buy it anywhere in Michigan and you can't buy it at Walmart. Nard is extremely rare. It is extremely expensive, and it comes from a very, very far away place. Did you know there are some plants that can only be grown in certain places? And one of the reasons that you can only grow a plant in a certain place is the height, the elevation. I didn't learn this till I went to see the sequoias in Southern California. You've got to get up to, if I remember right, 7,000 feet before you see the first one. They can't live below that. And that goes up to 9,000 feet, and they can't live above that. Do you think I have my heights right? It was 7,000 or 8,000. It was 2,000 feet. And when you're coming out of Fresno, you're coming up, and every 1,000 feet up, there's a sign, 4,000 feet, 5,000 feet, 6,000 feet. And I came to one of these signs, and right then was the first sequoia that I saw, which amazed me. Well, the same thing is true with this thing called nard. It only grows in the Himalayan mountains up so many thousands of feet. It doesn't grow anywhere else, and it can't grow at lower elevation. That makes it very rare and very expensive, and has to travel very far away. So it's very significant that here in verse 3 that we just read, a woman came with an alabaster jar. What's an alabaster jar? It's alabaster. Anybody know what alabaster is? Very expensive. That's actually the point. But it's a ceramic kind of thing, but it's very expensive. It's something you don't put ordinary stuff in. It's for very, very special stuff. Number 2, it says a very expensive perfume. And this is not an exaggeration. I tried to find what nard sells for today, because it's still made today. But I couldn't find anything about what it sells for. I know some of you are going to get out your phone, you're going to look it up. So if somebody finds what nard is selling for anywhere, what is I looked for it, but I couldn't. $33 for a half an ounce. That's just unbelievable. But can you find it? And I couldn't find anywhere that it said you could find it in the United States even. It's on Amazon? They're selling it on Amazon? Wow. Yeah, no, you can get some. Okay, now what is nard used for? Well, we're going to find out real quick. This woman pours the nard over Christ to prepare him for his burial. And that was one of the things it was used for as a spice to go on for a deceased person. But it was also used because of its just aroma. It has an extremely pleasing, nice aroma, and strong, very strong. And notice it said pure nard. Just like any kind of other things, people would water stuff down. But when it says pure nard, that means its price goes really sky high. You know, it's not watered down by anything. But nard's also used for, it's a calming. People that have it and they have it on them or they have it around them and they can smell it, it calms their anxiety. And it is also sometimes used as a kind of medication because it can help people that are sick. It's used in a variety of ways. So I've got 4 I just said, including, for burial. So this woman comes with this alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. That's 3 ways it's saying that this is really something rare. Okay, you got that? She broke the jar. You don't break alabaster jars. But she broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. And it's called a perfume here. Any comments on that?
I did find a spot that said the word of the ointment, the word of all the
Yeah, well, we're going to read that in just a second, yeah. Yeah, that's right here in the text. Okay. We're not there. We're getting there. Verse 4 and verse 5. Some of those present were saying indignantly. Indignantly, you know what that means? Like angry? To one another, why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor. And they rebuked her harshly. Verse 6 through 9. Leave her alone, said Jesus. Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them anytime you want, but you will not always have me. Now think about this. When is Jesus saying this one more time? He knows he's going to be dead in 2 or 3 days. He's not talking abstractly here. You will not always have me. She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. Truly I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has said will also be told in memory of her. How about that? Any comments? Yeah, normally, I wasn't going to go into that, but that's fine. A denarius was normally a 1 day's wage. So more than 300 means it's something like a year. In other words, a lot of work to buy what was bought here. Okay, anyway, verse 10 and 11. Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the chief priests to betray Jesus to them. They were delighted to hear this and promised to give him money, so he watched for an opportunity to hand him over. This is the first time that Judas talks to the Jews about betraying Jesus. Now, why here? And in the Gospels where it tells a story, it always tacks on this thing about Judas. Why here? We don't know. I'll just, say that. But think about it. What was Judas obsessed about? Money. Ding, ding. And for Judas to see this woman pour an unbelievably expensive thing on Jesus' head, which means it's gone. I think this is something that probably said to Judas, I can't put up with this. I can't handle this. Maybe. That's my thought. Tom? 300 denarii, much worth, much less. Somebody want to look that one up? What's a piece of silver? I'm not sure if I could find it in my little dictionary here pretty quick. So somebody can find what 30 pieces of silver is worth. But it was nowhere near a year's wage. Not in the ballpark. Yes, and I wasn't going to talk about that either. There's a question, but that's okay. With short. Many people think that this story is also mentioned in John chapter 12, verses 1 through 8, and that this woman is Mary, that is the sister of Martha and the sister of Lazarus. The two stories are not really exactly the same, and a number of people think that they are too different. So we either don't know who it is, or maybe it was Mary. Not Mary, the mother of Jesus, but Mary, the sister of Martha and Lazarus. Okay? That's about all we know.
So a shekel was about 4 denarii.
Silver shekel was 4 denarii. So 30 would be 4 times 30 is 120. Okay. 6 weeks. So it was money, but it wasn't in the ballpark of a year's wages. Thank you. Okay. The internet is such a wonderful thing. Yeah. Like everything else. So verses 10 and 11 about Judas. Here's where Judas intends to betray Christ. We have no idea why Judas wanted to betray Christ. Maybe it wasn't so much the money, because it doesn't say that he asked for money. It says they offered him money. But he did take the money. But then, later on, he changed his mind. He came back and he threw the money back at him. And then he went out and killed himself. So why did Judas betray Christ? I don't know. But it could possibly be here that he just couldn't stand that Jesus was getting such honor with something that was extremely valuable. Oh, it also, remember, says that Judas was the one that carried the bag of coins that they carried around, and that he would steal money out of the bag. So Judas was the thief. Bill?
I've also heard that Judas was kind of pushing Jesus. Jesus talked about being crucified, and it looks like things aren't going to go the way that he envisioned it going. He was a pretty shrewd businessman, and so he was going to try and force Jesus into standing up against the Jews and stuff, because he thought if he betrayed him, he would stand up and not be killed, and he would become the
Maybe. Maybe. The text doesn't say that, but sure, that's one thing people have thought. Oh yeah, I had just a little bit more to say about nard, and I wrote that down here. If you've never heard of nard, you may have heard of spikenard, which is another word that people use. And then there is a third one called American spikenard. And you can buy that in America, but I looked up the details on this on the internet, of course, and it comes from a different plant. It's not the plant that grows in the Himalayas. The plant grows in America, in the United States and Canada. The plant is called Aurelia racemosa, and it's a different plant. But it also has some of the qualities of nard, that it is a very aromatic and a strong aroma, and people like it. But it's not the same thing as nard from the Himalayas. Okay? And that takes care of that note. Oh, they brought them here. Do you know how high up they are? No, I don't mean the tree. I mean the elevation. Well, it's got to be real low. And they're alive? Wow, well, they don't grow that way in California. Okay. I didn't know we had sequoias in Michigan. Wow, live and learn. Maybe it was an experiment to see if it would work. No, I only had 2 sticky notes today, folks. But I do write in my Bible a lot. Okay, can we go on to verse 12? This one goes for a little bit, 12 through 16. And this is the beginning of the Lord's Supper. Okay? The Last Supper, it says. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, when it was customary to sacrifice the Passover lamb, Jesus' disciples asked him, "Where do you want us to go to make preparations for you to eat the Passover?" So he sent 2 of his disciples, telling them, "Go into the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him. Say to the owner of the house he enters, 'The teacher asks, where is my guest room where I may eat the Passover with the disciples?' He will show you a large room upstairs, furnished and ready. Make preparation for us there." Now, what day is this? This is the day before Jesus is crucified. And there's actually controversy about what day this would be. Some people think it would be on Wednesday or Thursday, but we don't really know. At any rate, this is where the disciples find the place and get the place ready. So starting at verse 16, well, I read that. Yeah. The disciples left, went in the city, found things just as Jesus had told them. They prepared the Passover. Now we're going to read 17 through 20, I guess, 21. When evening came, this is the night before Jesus is crucified, okay? When evening came, Jesus arrived with the 12. While they were reclining at the table eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray us, one who is eating with me." Now, I'm going to stop in places, and I hesitate to do this because I get into detail, and sometimes the detail can take away from the real meaning of the whole thing. But I'll do it anyway a little bit. Notice it says they were reclining at the table. When we go, we're going to have a meal here today, right? Aren't we? Okay. Are we going to go in there and recline at the table? We sit in chairs. But there, they didn't. They would have like what we think of as a lounge around a table, and they would be literally reclining on the lounge. You with me? Okay, that's what it means here. They were literally reclining on a lounge kind of thing. It would be higher at one end than at the other end. And that's how they ate. You eat a meal laying on your side. Very strange for us, but it's the way they do it. And oh, by the way, I drive people nuts talking about Japan, but I've been to numerous times in Japan where they did the same thing. Not because of Christianity, because that's how they would recline at a table to eat. And, okay, anyway, when evening came, Jesus arrived with the 12. While they were reclining at the table eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me." They were saddened. And one by one they said to him, "Surely you don't mean me?" Verse 20, "It is one of the 12, he replied. one who dips bread into the bowl with me. Now, this is all it says here about the dipping of the bread. But if you go over to John chapter 13, verse 26, you'll see that Jesus then dipped some bread into the bowl and handed it to Judas. So Mark doesn't say that, but it's there in John 13, 26. So we know who he's talking about from the Gospel of John. One who dips bread into the bowl with me. Verse 21. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him, but woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born. Who's sitting in front of him or laying in front of him? The apostles. Judas is there. He hears Jesus say this, that it would be better if he had never been born. That's called an insult. Verse 22. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, Take this, this is my body. Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, and they all drank from it. What is this? This is what we do in the Lord's Supper. Okay? Breaking of the bread, take this, this is my body, took a cup, he gave it to them, and they all drank from it. Judas was with them when Jesus washed the feet. Judas was with them when they took the Lord's Supper for the first time. It's after this that he leaves. Any comments on any of that? We can turn the page in the Pew Bible, starting at verse 24. I'll go down to 30, just 24, 25. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many, he said to them. Truly I tell you, I will not drink again from the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new in the kingdom of God. This last phrase, until I drink it new in the kingdom of God, is not found anywhere else. It's found in the other Gospels, but there's no explanation of what it means. I think most Christians think that when we take the Lord's Supper here, Jesus is participating with us in heaven. I don't know, but the Bible doesn't explain what that means. But there's more here. Blood of the covenant. I told you before that it bothers me a good deal when I've been teaching young people. I ask them what the Bible is, the Old Testament, New Testament. Now, I say, what is the Testament? And many, many times, as I've done this through the years, they all say, I don't know. And then I come to the word covenant, and I say, what is a covenant? Same thing. I don't know. This is important. The Old Testament was the agreement between God and the Jews. And the simplest way that I have found that the Old Testament and New Testament says this is the words, I will be your God, you will be my people. And that's what the Jews were in the Old Testament. That was the covenant that God had with them. I am your God, you are my people. But now we have the blood of a new covenant. And this blood of Jesus is the blood of our covenant with Jesus. And it's still the same covenant. I will be your God, you will be my people. It's really not more complicated than that. But the blood of the covenant is how the covenant was paid for, so to speak. Everybody with me? Tom?
I was going to say, too, I think maybe a struggle that we have, and I had when I was younger, too, is we would say a covenant is like a promise.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'll promise to do this for you, you promise to do that for me.
Right.
But in the Bible, a covenant was something that was made between someone with authority, usually someone who didn't. And so maybe people today think like, well, I can enter into a covenant with God if I choose to, and if I choose not to, then that's on me. And that is true, but the idea is that it's a little different in that we don't really have the privilege of deciding whether we will or won't. We're in a covenant with God. And so a lot of times when I think when people
You're right. Everything you said is exactly right. A covenant is something that both sides, though, have to agree to be in the covenant. Also, when I've taught kids and other folks, I would say the Old Testament or the Old Covenant was between God and the Jews. And I say, who is the New Testament covenant with? And they'll say, God and everybody. No, not everybody's in the covenant. Not everybody agrees to be in the covenant. You have to come into the covenant. Bill?
Or remember when Abraham, when God made the covenant with Abraham, remember they took the animals and ripped the seven in half, and if this is broken, may this happen to me. And the flame wants to, and that's God walking through that. If the covenant is broken. So, broken no matter whose side it was on. So man broke the covenant, and this is where Jesus is suffering. You know, may this be
Yeah.
done to me. That's what is actually happening here. Is that God is being beaten and scourged and hung on the cross. He's doing all of that because we broke that covenant. God said, this covenant is broken, may this happen to me. And so he rectified that covenant by that happening to him.
We use the word covenant today rarely, but it is still used. It is used sometimes in marriage. The words will be used sometimes in the marriage document. It is used sometimes in the purchase of property or a house, a covenant, an agreement. And if it's broken, you can go to court over that kind of thing, you know. But we still use the word once in a while. But it's not in everyday language, and that's one reason why people don't have a clue what it really is talking about, because it's not an everyday word. Any other comments on this? Here's one little tiny thing that is a detail, but I think it's important. Verse 25. Well, 24. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. Truly I tell you, I will not drink again from the fruit of the vine. There are churches today that teach that when Jesus said, this is my blood, that it chemically changed, or it changed to the blood of Christ. Notice the verse itself. After he said, this is my blood, he says, I will not drink again from the fruit of the vine. Jesus himself is not saying that it changes to his blood. He's saying it's still fruit of the vine, that we drink remembering his blood. But we're not drinking blood. And by the way, in the first century, when Christians were young and the Romans didn't care much for the Christians, one of the allegations that they brought against Christians was they drink blood, because they talked about Christ shedding his blood for them, and they talked about taking the Lord's Supper, and the Romans were spreading around that they were literally drinking blood. That kind of thing, yeah. And cannibalism, yeah. And they weren't. But, you know, that was what they were trying to be angry about. Somebody else have your hand up? Okay. Any comments down through verse 26? We're moving along, but we're not going to make it to 76 verses, I'm telling you. Okay, verse 27. We'll read down 27 through 31. You will all fall away, Jesus told them, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. And that, if you look at the bottom, you see that's a verse out of Zechariah chapter 13, verse 7. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee. Peter declared, even if all fall away, I will not. Truly, I tell you, Jesus answered, today, yes, tonight, before the rooster crows twice, you yourself will disown me 3 times. That's an insult. But it came true, as we're going to read later on. But Peter insisted emphatically, even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you, and all the others did the same. It wasn't just Peter that denied Christ in a way. The others ran away too. When times got tough, they disappeared. It was Peter that actually went into where Jesus was held in a trial. It doesn't say the others came. I think they were probably more scared. They scattered. But then Peter denied that he knew Christ 3 times. There is a thing interesting in verse 28, but I'm not going to go into this with you here. But I want to give you a suggestion. If you would ever think I would like to do a little tiny study of the Bible myself, here's something that you can do. After I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee. There are numbers of verses that talk about this very thing. After Jesus rose from the dead, I will go ahead of you into Galilee. Well, where's Galilee? It's nowhere near Jerusalem. It's up there, where Capernaum is. Look in your Bible to find where it talks about this actually happening. Because a lot of people, they don't get this. Now, turn with me to the last words in the Gospel of Matthew. It's on page, whatever it is, 1521. A lot of people think that here is talking about Jesus going back into heaven. And this is just before he goes back into heaven. Not so. Verse 16. Matthew 28:16. Then 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you, and surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age. This is not Jerusalem. This is Galilee. This is after Jesus has been raised from the dead. So Matthew is not Jesus going back into heaven. Where does Jesus go back into heaven? It's in Acts chapter 1. We read it. Well, my class on Wednesday night read it not too long ago. It's on the top of Mount Olives. Remember? You go up the hill, you go to the Garden of Gethsemane, you go up to the top, you come over the top. That's where Jesus went back into heaven. So Jesus is raised from the dead. He meets them up in Galilee at some mountain there, and then he meets them later on back down at Jerusalem. It's easy to miss that. Okay? So there are about 5 or 6 verses you can find in the New Testament who talk about this business, about Jesus going to Galilee after he was raised from the dead and beating people up there. For what it's worth. Any comments on any of that down through verse 31? Okay, this is a longer section. We got 10 more minutes. We can do this anyway. Starting at verse 32. They went to a place called Gethsemane. Now, where's this? It's called the Garden of Gethsemane. Where is it? It's in Jerusalem. It's halfway up the Mount of Olives. You can walk to there. The word Gethsemane itself has meaning. It means an oil press. Oil from what? Oil from olive trees. And you can go today to the Garden of Gethsemane and you can find olive trees there. Now, not a whole lot of them have been there for the last 2,000 years because most olive trees don't live that long. But there's olive trees there. You can go visit that today. Okay, anyway. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, Sit here while I pray. He took Peter, James, and John along with him and began to be deeply distressed and troubled. Why was he deeply depressed and troubled? He knew what was coming. And he's going to talk about that here in a minute. He knows this is his last night. And he's going to die the next day. He became to be deeply distressed and troubled. My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. He said to them, Stay here and keep watch. Going a little further, he fell to the ground and prayed that if possible the hour might pass from him. Abba, Father, he said, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will. I've heard sermons and classes and everything on these words, and they're really not more complicated than what they say right here. Jesus asked God if this cup, what does that mean? This agony and death coming the next day, he asked if it could be taken away. He did ask. But then the next words out of his mouth are, Yet not what I will, but what you will. Now here's where I want to throw in something that maybe you thought of and maybe not. What time of day is this right here? We don't know exactly, but it's deep in the dark. It was very possibly around midnight. Pitch black, okay? If Jesus was determined to avoid having to die, what did he have to do? Just walk away into the dark. And would anybody have stopped? Well, the apostles are sleeping. He could have just walked away. He didn't walk away. He stayed. And we'll hear more about that as we go on, where he says, I'm here to do what God sent me to do. He didn't walk away. Yet not what I will, but what you will. Have you ever said that to God in a prayer? You know, not what I want, but what you want. These are really, really important verses. Oh yeah, let's talk a second about Abba, verse 36. Abba, there's a note down at the bottom, verse 36, Aramaic for father. Jesus spoke Aramaic. This is the word he says. But then Mark translates it into Greek. That's why it says father, because people didn't understand Aramaic. But Abba, or Abba, however people say it, is not the, what could you say, it's not the word for, well, it says Aramaic for father, but it's not the, what can I say, polite or real respectful. I shouldn't say not respectful. I'm trying to say it means dad. It's a very casual word. An endearing term. Yeah. And of the word, see, Jesus said all of this in Aramaic, but the writer puts down that one word to show the love and respect and concern that Jesus had for his Father. Okay, down through verse, 37, 38. Then he returned to his disciples, found them sleeping. Simon, he said to Peter, are you asleep? Couldn't you keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Now remember, it's about midnight. They were tired. I'm not defending them. Jesus said, couldn't you just stay awake a little while? A little bit? But they went to sleep. And then, again, this verse. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. How many times you heard that said in your lifetime? Oh, so many, many times. There are lots of people who don't know that this verse comes out of the Bible. A lot of people don't know that Jesus said these words, or the context in which Jesus said these words. In the context, he's talking about Peter, James, and John and the apostles. He's saying, you guys love me, you want to be with me, but you still zonk out and go to sleep. Spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Have you ever felt that about yourself? That you want to do what's right and you find yourself doing things you shouldn't be doing? The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Such a true statement. 39. Once more he went away and prayed the same thing. When he came back, he again found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. They did not know what to say to him. Returning the third time, he said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? Enough, the hour has come. Look, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer. He could have walked into the dark, but he's the one that wakes up his apostles and said, they're here right now to take me. He stands there waiting for them. How about that? Tom?
The disciples. So I think it's certainly late and they certainly were tired. But I think the things that Jesus said, we only get like a snapshot of your heart. If you go to John, there's like 5 chapters of what happened in the upper room before they went to the garden.
Right.
There were lots of things that Jesus said to them
that are not here.
that would cause them to be sorrowful too.
Yeah.
I mean, they were tired, they were filled with sorrow, they were out in the middle of the night. And I think sometimes, I sometimes find the worst time for me to decide to pray is when I lay down at night to go to sleep. Because either I'm going to be awake and I can't go to sleep, or I'm going to be asleep and I can't finish my prayer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you kind of can put yourself in a position.
And just maybe by this night, the apostles were getting the idea, since he only said it to them many times, that he's going to die. Sure.
God when you said that, spirit is willing, the flesh is weak. What did Peter just say? I don't care if everybody else denies it, I won't. Well, his spirit was strong, but his flesh was weak.
Sure was.
You think about all the times you read something and say, oh God, if you'll just get me through this, I'll never do X again.
Yeah, sure.
And then, you know, it's, the spirit is willing, the flesh is weak. I mean, we certainly can't point fingers back at ourselves.
And it's easy for us to put Peter down, okay? Peter was a loudmouth, okay? He was kind of the leader or so of the folks. He'd speak up a whole lot. He would question things they had no business questioning, and sometimes Jesus, well, it was to Peter Jesus one time said, "Get behind me, Satan." He said, "You don't care about things of God, you just care about things of man." But when you read 1 Peter and 2 Peter, you're reading a different man. Peter grew up. Peter became a solid, stable, good guy. He changed. And that says something to me, that God can work on me and you, and he can make us into better and different people than what we start out with. I've often said that men are stupid and women are crazy. Argue with that if you want, you know. But all of us have things that we wish we weren't. If I could tell you the number of times that I've been so stupid and said stupid things that I think later on, why, oh, why did you ever say that? You know, it's embarrassing. But it's the reality. And hopefully, you know, as you grow older, you you grow up, you know. Yeah. Okay, well, we got about 1 minute, so we're going to just read verse 43 and then we're going to stop. Just as he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, appeared. With him a crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders. One of the reasons I did this and wrote underneath here, underlined that last sentence, is I always thought it was the Roman soldiers that came and arrested Jesus. But this is very clear. These were the soldiers of the Jewish religious and civil leaders. Remember, the Sanhedrin was not just religious leaders, they were also the civil government. They had people we would call police or soldiers. And it says very clearly that the crowd sent from the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders. That's the Sanhedrin. These were the people who arrested Jesus. These were the people who turned Jesus over to the Romans, and the Romans killed him. But these folks were Jews. All of these folks were Jews. And then, of course, we go on, and here's where Judas comes up and kisses him. We'll start at the top of page 1551 at Mark 14:44 next week. Any comments here at the end? Yeah. Yeah. They had in the past the authority to kill of their own, but when the Romans came in, they took that authority away from them. They said, you don't kill anybody. Now, by the way, does the Sanhedrin actually kill somebody when they weren't supposed to by the Romans? Yes. In the book of Acts, they killed Stephen. They stoned him. They were still under the control of the Romans, but that says that they got so extremely angry at what Stephen was saying that they picked up stones and just killed him. Now, whether they got in trouble with the Romans later on, who knows? The Bible doesn't say. Yeah, but the Romans took that authority away from the Jewish leadership. Okay, are we done? Anybody? Thank you for your good, kind attention. We'll start next week at Mark 14:44.